On the morning of May 8th, 1945, radios crackled with the sound of history. Across Europe and beyond, people gathered around wireless sets in kitchens, town halls, and barracks, listening to the news they had longed for through 6 relentless years. The war in Europe was over. Nazi Germany had surrendered. Victory in Europe Day, VE Day, had come. The joy was immediate, but it was also uncertain. The exhale of people who had held their breath for too long. The scenes that followed were both jubilant and surreal. In London, strangers danced in Trafalgar Square. In Paris, church bells rang out across the city. In tiny villages and industrial towns alike, people poured out into the streets, many for the first time without fear. Some wore uniforms, still dusty from duty. Others pulled out forgotten suits and dresses, mothballed since the war began. It was an eruption of emotion, but it was also a tentative step into the unknown. The war had ended, but the world had changed forever. Yet for all the celebration, VE Day was not a neat conclusion. For many, it was a day marked by the ache of those who weren't there to see it. Sons, sisters, brothers, fathers, sweethearts. There were empty chairs at kitchen tables, telegrams folded in drawers, grief that had yet to find language. People cheered, but they also cried. The collective jubilation was threaded through with private sorrow. Now 80 years later, VE Day risks fading into abstraction. A page in a history book, a grainy black and white newsreel. But the day itself was deeply lived, deeply felt. It surged through ordinary homes and hands, woven into flags hastily sewn from old curtains. Beer bottles clinked in spontaneous street parties. Lipstick reapplied for the first time in years. Victory was not tidy, it was tear-streaked and ragged, filled with absence as much as relief. To mark the 80th anniversary, we must ask, how does a moment like VE Day endure? Where does it live, if not just in parades and speeches? It lingers in the objects we kept. A tattered Union Jack folded in a shoebox. Ration books saved long past their usefulness. A diary entry written in shaky script. Its ink bled with emotion. These items weren't designed to last, but they have. They carry the weight of the ordinary made historical. They remind us that history is not just what happened, but how it was felt. A pressed flower in a letter. A child's scribbled drawing of tanks and planes. A pair of gloves worn on a rare night out. Consider the kitchen radio, a Bakelite box sitting on a sideboard. On VE Day, it was the bearer of impossible news.
Yesterday morning at 2:41 a.m. at General Eisenhower's headquarters, General Jodl, the representative of the German High Command, and of Grand Admiral Dönitz, the designated head of the German state, signed the act of unconditional surrender of all German land, sea, and air forces in Europe to the Allied Expeditionary Forces and simultaneously to the Soviet High Command. Hostilities will end officially at 1 minute after midnight tonight, Tuesday, the 8th of May. The German war is therefore at an end.
A grandmother's apron might have been dusted with flour when she turned up the volume. That radio, now perhaps silent on a shelf in a museum or a grandchild's home, still hums with that moment. History isn't only in monuments. Sometimes it crackles faintly from a speaker that once made a nation weep. Sometimes it lives in the static, in the silence that followed, the very furniture of that moment. The kitchen table, the teacup rattling in its saucer, can still hold memory. Or think of the clothesline, strung across a London alley, suddenly adorned with bunting fashioned from scraps of fabric. Children waved handmade flags, some still unsure of what victory meant. A returning soldier held his child for the first time. A mother stared out of a window, unsure whether to celebrate or to mourn. These images don't belong to textbooks. They reside in memory, in family stories passed down like heirlooms. They are the quiet, enduring details that resist the erasure of time. VE Day's 80th anniversary is not just a commemoration of military victory. It's a chance to reflect on how history resides in the small, the personal, the everyday. It invites us to listen closely to the stories embedded in family heirlooms, in photographs curled at the edges, in the quiet spaces left by those who never returned. To honor VE Day is not only to remember the end of war, but to honor the resilience it took to endure it. And in that reflection, we are also reminded of the home front, of the women who ran factories, the children who carried gas masks to school, the communities that grew victory gardens in every square patch of earth, the people who saved scraps, who shared what little they had, who found dignity in the mundane acts of waiting and watching. Their war stories were not always told in action, but in patience, in perseverance. As we remember, we do so not only with ceremony, but with presence. With a hand on the back of a wooden chair that someone once pulled up to a victory meal. With a glance at a handwritten letter smudged with time. With gratitude, not just for peace won, but for lives endured. For the dignity of rationed meals. For blackouts and knitting circles. For letters opened and reread under flickering lights. For the knowledge that survival itself was a kind of quiet heroism. 80 years on, VE Day continues to echo. Not loudly, but clearly. In the fabric of everyday life. In the objects that outlast us, and in the moments when we pause to remember what it took to find our way home. It calls us to look closely, to hold on to the tangible reminders, to carry forward the memory of what unity, sacrifice, and hope can truly mean in the face of darkness. These echoes don't belong to the past alone. They live in the choices we make now, in how we honor one another, in how we keep the stories going. May we celebrate VE Day, 80 years of VE Day, with our family, with our friends, with our neighbours, as a country, proud of what we achieved and what it took to get there. We're Britain. Happy VE Day.